This podcast is brought to you in part by some really cool people. I like to call them my Patreon podcast producers. Make sure you check them out on Instagram. Daryl at Your Level Fitness and Amy at Gym of the Gym. That's GEM of the GYM. Give them a follow. Show some love. They are helping to make all this possible. And stay tuned at the end of the show for more details on how you can join this awesome group and have your name read right here alongside them. Are you Team Apple? I got to shout out all of you checking out this show right now on an iPhone, iPad, etc. In fact, nearly 70% of you are listening to me on one of these devices. It would mean the world to me if you took a moment to leave a review. This is one of the best things that you can do for this podcast to help get the word out. And while you're at it, leave reviews for some of your other favorite shows. I bet they would really dig it. Oh, yeah! Have you heard any of my podcasts before?
Yes, I have. I've heard a few. The one that I heard most recently, so I'm behind on a few episodes, but this is probably about, probably 4 weeks back now. And I'm forgetting her name, but it's the person that you met at the concert.
Julie,
yes. And how she was talking about her story and things like that. So, yeah, no, that was really cool.
No, you know, the funny thing is, because all of these are, or most of these are people that I've never met and never talked to, a lot of times we start talking and they're like, hey, are we recording? Is this thing going? And I'm like, yeah, just go with the flow.
Yeah, no, but that was cool because I think she was one of the few people that you interviewed that you had met before in like an outside kind of setting.
Yeah, and that was interesting too, because when that happens, a lot of the times we end up doing it in like a public place, like a Starbucks. And so literally I've got it. Let me see if I can pick this up here. I've got like this little recorder, this field recorder. This thing works amazing, by the way.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I take it, wherever I go. So I've done one in like a barbecue restaurant. I've done one in Starbucks. I've actually done, let's see, probably 2 or 3 of them in Starbucks. I've done one in Panera Bread, and surprisingly, knock on wood, I've not had any issue doing it yet. So I'm going to keep trying and pressing my luck.
Yeah, no, that works because then you're always ready. So
yeah, definitely. And this thing can take like an external battery, so it runs on double A's, but I never use that. I either run it to the wall when I'm here, or I'll just plug it into one of those little external battery things, and it just works great. So you can literally take it anywhere. And you create a lot of content yourself, so it's like when we're trying to make all this content, we want to be able to take it on the road. We want to be able to create it from anywhere. I hate being tied to like the office necessarily, and I hope to one day just be able to just travel around the world and meet the people that we talk to, so we're in the same room and everything is good. But Skype works.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So that is the goal. That is the goal, but we're getting there.
Yeah, you're well on your way. So
I'm trying my best. I am putting in all the hard work, because as we know, hard work always wins.
Yes, it does.
I'm trying to think back how we ended up getting connected. That's one of the things I like to go back with any guest and talk about, is how we get connected. I want to say it's been a while now, right? I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So I saw you on Instagram. That's kind of how I stumbled across, because I follow like a lot of people who are either on weight loss journeys or health journeys or things of that nature. And so your feed came across my profile. Like, you know what I mean? One day your profile came across my feed, and I started clicking through, and I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And just kept going through and through. So I ended up following you on Instagram and then kind of DMing you that way.
Yeah, yeah, it's always cool, the connection. And actually, we'll just start with Instagram because, it's one of the things that early on that I never expected to go the way it went. Because I've joked about this before in the past, but in case new people, like I remember just using Instagram as like, here's me with my beer, and I'm at a party, or I'm
Right.
hanging out, and then when I got started on this journey and I like meant it this time and really started doing it, and I was like, maybe I'll start, documenting it for accountability, because the thought is if everybody knows I'm doing it and I stop doing it, there's going to be at least a couple of people that are going to ask, hey, about that thing you were doing. And so for me, I know you start posting and you're putting in hashtags. The next thing you know, people are stumbling across your page.
Hmm.
And I can imagine this is exactly what happened with you. So, how did you get started on Instagram, and how does it go into meeting a bunch of weight loss folks?
Yeah, so kind of similar to you. I got onto Instagram because I had had some success with losing weight myself. And I was looking, trying to see if there was a space kind of on social media for other people who were either posting and looking at tips and ideas and kind of just exchanging what worked and what didn't work, or at least following along different people's perspectives and their journey. I think oftentimes whenever you embark on something new, or you're doing something differently than the people around you, you don't necessarily feel isolated, but everyone's not always moving towards your same goal.
Yeah.
And so even though it is social media and it's the land of the stage shots, and I'm not, you know what I mean, though, it's like you project what you want to see on social media. It's not 100% real, right? But I liked that there were so many people who were taking time to document their own journeys, and showing like where they're starting and showing their progress. And so that's kind of how I got started. I was like, well, I'm on a journey also, so maybe I'll document mine as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I could tell you that when it comes to obviously I can only speak for myself, but when it comes to my page, it's about as real as it could possibly get. I
Yeah.
mean, you could ask my wife. I'm going through my old Google photos, and if anything, whether back when I was big or not, I always took a lot of pictures. I obviously felt confident enough to have pictures, and so there is no shortage of photos. And I'm on there, honestly looking for some of the most embarrassing things, because it's a reminder. This is who I was, and I'm not running from this person. I'm not hiding from this person. I'm not ashamed of this person. I'm proud of this person, because this person, they stuck with it as long as they could until, we get this light bulb in our head to make the change.
No, agreed. And I think that's why pages like yours and do so well, because you can see that you're showing like the real person. I think one of my favorite Instagram memes are the ones where, you'll see people and they're flexing and they're all posed. And then it's like the same shot a minute later. And you're like, wait, where did the abs go? And where did all these
Yeah.
different things? So I think it's important and I feel like accounts that are more authentic right now are the ones that kind of are leading the way, rather than having to project this, picture perfect image, because nobody's perfect. We're all a work in progress, but it's nice seeing other people work towards their goals.
Yeah, I think that in 2019, I was about to say 2018 because it still doesn't seem real that we're already here. I think in 2019, people know that the BS is up, and they can sniff
Right.
out the real versus the fake. I mean, you're going to have a percentage of people that may be bamboozled, for lack of a better term, but for the most part, I think people are able to sniff people out on their BS and know if they're like real and genuine or not.
Right.
And whether you're an individual that's telling your story, or even a business, I can't tell you how many times I'm on like somewhere like LinkedIn and I see businesses that are just putting out the same robo content that doesn't tell me a story. Like, I don't know who's behind this. I don't know, what they're actually trying to tell me, other than here's our product and buy it. It's not giving me a story, and thus I can't get emotionally invested in whatever it is that they're trying to show me. It's just like wrestling. And I know a lot of people joke they know I'm a wrestling fan, but it's like if the the storylines aren't good enough and you can't get emotionally invested, how can you buy into the product that they're putting out? You've got
Right.
to, you can't, paint by numbers and phone it in. You've really got to create some compelling content. So whether that's a business or like what we're doing as individuals, sharing our unique story as real, raw, and honest as possible. I mean, obviously we don't go
Mhm.
into the super details, but like, sharing real life experiences.
Exactly. It's about being relatable, and showing that we all have common themes, common struggles, common successes, common setbacks, and how can we build on those experiences going forward?
Definitely, definitely. And you mentioned, your own weight loss issues in the past. I mean, when did all this, kind of come on as far as, going back to your childhood even, was it a problem then? Did it become a problem later? I know for me it was like middle school on, it was constantly present as an issue, but how was it for you?
Yeah, I would say similarly, in like late elementary school, junior high range, my weight would fluctuate up and down. And sometimes I would lose weight and keep it off for, maybe a period of several months, but it would always seem like it would creep back up. And then in college, I lost a decent amount of weight in college, but then after college, in medical school and in residency, it kind of just picked back up
Right.
to when I had my second son. When I had him, I was at my highest adult weight, which was 264 pounds. So, and that was about 4.5 years ago now. So after that, again, tried different things, weight loss plans and etc. Would lose a little bit, but gain it
Yeah.
back, that yo-yo. Um, until until 2017, where I started actually losing weight and maintaining it. After I read a book by Dr. Jason Fung called The Obesity Code, which talks about intermittent fasting and kind of the science behind that. So that's really what kind of led to goodness, I'd say we're going on 15, 18 months now, and this is the longest sustained weight loss that I've had in my adult life. So I'm pretty pleased and continuing to learn more.
No, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, 2017. That was also the year I got started as well. So that's awesome. We'll throw a virtual fist bump for the
Yes,
2017ers right there.
exactly.
And you mentioned the intermittent fasting. Now, this is something that I see talked about in the circles on Instagram and whatnot. And this is kind of your specialty. You talk a lot about this. So tell me all about it, because I don't, I hear about it. I hear people they're hashtagging it. They're briefly
Right.
talking about it, but maybe kind of for the people that aren't aware of what it is, or maybe like me, they've just been scrolling through and they don't really understand it. I guess kind of give the basic of it and then how that applies to what you were doing.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that you hear out there about intermittent fasting, a lot of misconceptions, but the premise behind intermittent fasting is just that our bodies, are, we were designed to have periodic breaks of gut rest, of rest from intaking food. And so in our society now, with we're fortunate, right? Food for most people is not an issue. Now the quality of the food, that's a whole different issue, but food availability is there. So if you wanted to have a meal every couple hours, you could do that. Now whether you were hungry or not, if you wanted to eat constantly throughout the day, you could do that. What intermittent is the fact that when you give your gut time to rest, you are not always constantly spiking insulin. And we're now learning more about the role of insulin resistance in its central state into disease in general. So, if you're insulin resistant, you tend to require higher amounts of insulin to process sugar, process glucose. Well, insulin also is an indicator to store fat. So, you can end up piling on more abdominal fat, visceral fat, which is linked to disease. It is metabolically active. It can, affect blood pressure, lead to diabetes, fatty liver, all of these different conditions, and they're all interrelated. And at the core, when we look at it, many of these disease states all have insulin resistance as a component. So if you give your body a break from food intake, your insulin levels, in theory, should decrease. You should be able to mobilize fat stores and get rid of some of that central adipose tissue, which is then contributing to other disease states.
You just blow my mind right now. You're just like,
So there's a method. There's actual method to it, because I think a lot
okay.
of people hear about it and they're like, "Oh, you're just skipping meals," and
Right.
that's not good. And it's not that we're skipping meals. There's something, and let me know if it's getting too like geeky or whatever.
No, no, not at all. The
But
people listening will be very interested.
Okay, so, but we have something called the circadian rhythm. So there is a natural kind of pulsatile activity that our bodies go through every day in relationship to sunrise and sunset. So, I recently wrote a blog post on the fact that there was a study, and there's several studies, but this in particular study looked at people who consume the same total amount of calories in a 24-hour period, but they looked at people who had their main meal or the larger portion of their calories either at breakfast or the early afternoon versus those people who consumed regularly the majority of their calories after dark or their biggest meal. And what they noticed was that the people who didn't really eat at night or had minimal intake at night had a leaner body composition, had less abdominal fat, and were more metabolically healthy, even though they were eating the exact same caloric content. And so, what that leads us to believe, and then how the intermittent fasting plays into that, is that when it's our biological night, so when our melatonin is starting to rise and some of these other different hormones, our body really was not designed to eat after that time. So when we do eat, you're spiking your insulin more. So, right, that's going to lead to and feed into insulin resistance. Versus if you had that exact same meal at breakfast or lunch, you're more insulin sensitive at that time. Your body's more efficient in processing the calories and whatnot, so that you're not getting undue or undesired metabolic responses. And so that's kind of how the circadian rhythm plays into it, because when it's nighttime, think about when we were cavemen and all of that stuff. We stopped eating when you couldn't see in front of your face anymore. It's
Yeah.
very hard to go kill a wolf if you can't see and eat it. So these are some processes that were built in as we evolved over time, just naturally. But the problem is now we're out of sync with that. We work late, we get home late, we're eating at 8 or 9 o'clock, we can't get meal on, getting food of convenience. So just kind of all of these different things have been thrown off. But then it's no surprise looking at how our lifestyle has changed from even that of our grandparents as to why we've seen such a rise in prevalence of chronic disease in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I could tell you just tonight I had dinner at like 7:30, so it's pretty late. It's just that's the reality I think right now. It's like, the lives we have are just so crazy. We're so consumed, we're so involved, and we have our hands in so many different things that these schedules become just erratic. Like, when you eat, it's like, I do know that like when I get to work, for instance, around 6:30, I go right for breakfast because it's nice and early. I have my oatmeal. And then for lunch is right around noon or just before noon. But dinner is always that wild card. And there are some times where you're out with your friends and good God, you're maybe not eating dinner till like 11 o'clock, which is,
Right.
can be crazy.
Right, right. And so it's some of that trying to just diminish how much night eating can go a long way. And it's again one of those things where if you eat a meal at night, once a week, is that gonna, oh my gosh, undo everything? No, it's not. But it's just making a conscious effort. I think sometimes we're not even aware of it, right?
Right.
So first the first key is just to be aware, and then see if you can fit in your schedule, even if you just started with a minimum of 12-hour resting period between your last meal of the evening and your first meal in the morning. Even if you change nothing else, you would start to notice, subtle health benefits over time.
Sure. Now let me ask you this, because I know you've seen this in the camera. I've got my gallon jug here.
Mhm.
Does that count against the fast? You know, if I haven't eaten anything, if I go to drink a water, is that technically am I breaking the rule or?
No, so water is fine, and water honestly is the preferred beverage while you're fasting. So there's a lot of talk on what can you have when you fast, what can you not have when you fast. But if we're looking at fasting in its purest form, you would have one where like you're being very strict, where you're not intaking anything by mouth. But most people consider water okay, assuming it's not for religious purposes.
Yeah.
Water has no caloric value. It has no, sometimes people are like, oh, I can drink diet soda or diet pop. No, because that makes your brain think that you're getting something sweet, even though you're not. Water is just, it's neutral. Our cells need it, our bodily processes need it. So you could drink water as much as you want, obviously within
Yeah.
reason, during your fasting state. And that's not going to hurt anything. And it may actually help keep you from feeling hungry.
I'm just fascinated because it's got the wheels in my mind turning, and I'm wondering, like, how that would work on somebody like my schedule. If I have the breakfast at 6:30 in the morning and then I'm eating lunch around noon, so am I not eating again until breakfast? Is that how that's working, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, it depends on how long you want to fast.
Right.
So, for instance, if you like to eat breakfast at 6:30 in the morning, you could do something very easy where, in terms of you still have your lunch at noon,
Yeah.
and then on the days that you can, I know your schedule is hectic, but if you could have your dinner by 6:30 p.m. and then after that have water,
Right.
that's going to give you 12 hours of fasting where you're utilizing your sleep for the majority of your time. I think that's the other thing people don't realize. Sleep counts as fasting
Right.
because you're not eating. So that's my thing. If I, don't want to eat late at night, I'm like, oh, I meant to eat dinner and I'm like, now it's 9 o'clock. I'm like, well, if I go to bed, I'm going to stop thinking about food because I'm going to be asleep. So
Yeah.
I mean, use the night as your friend. No one's saying that you have to be the person who never eats lunch with anyone during the day, and you're telling all your coworkers, oh, I can't eat lunch with you because I'm fasting. You can make it fit into your life. And so, for someone who might be interested in having a longer fasting period than 12 hours, if they have their last meal, again we're talking about around 6:30 p.m. the night before, even delaying their breakfast until 9 or 10. I mean, you just did 16 hours or so. You could still get up first thing in the morning though at 6:30 and have a cup of coffee or have a cup of tea, as long as it doesn't have any additives or sweeteners in it.
Right. Yeah, that was actually the next thing I was going to ask you, because I see on Instagram, and I know everybody, they go to the beat of their own drum, and I think that's great. Make it work for you. But I've seen people fasting as long as 18, 19, 20 hours. I mean, is that recommended generally, or?
Well, it just depends on your, I guess, kind of personal situation, your disease state. There are some people who fast for a long time for therapeutic purposes. That's done though under physician supervision and things of that nature. But for the average person, I would say if you're just looking to break up insulin resistance, and if you're starting to also choose more whole foods, decrease your processed foods. If you did, 16 hours, that would be fine. And again, you can use some of that 16 hours as sleep. So
Yeah.
it's not that you're up during the day. But again, as little as 12 hours, especially if you're going to break up the night eating, has benefits.
Oh God, I would be a wild man if I tried to do this during the day. I got to tell you, I'd be just spinning around and all loopy if I had to go without the food during the day. I'd be going nuts.
Yeah, and that's why I think for a lot of people, just moving your dinner up a little earlier. And again, this doesn't have to be every day, right? A lot of people do intermittent fasting like 3 days a week. They look
Mm.
at their schedule, they pick the days of the week where they're going to meet the less resistance. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
less external pressures and things of that nature. And then on the other days, what I just encourage people is that reach for whole foods. And I think there's a lot of debate right now, what's better, plant-based versus a plant-based Mediterranean versus keto versus low carb versus vegan versus carnivore. I mean, we
Right.
can name off like a million different ways of eating. What I try to get people to focus on, not so much about the label of what you are. So, I'm keto carnivore, or I'm plant-based this, or whatever. The common ground is, done correctly, all of these different lifestyles are reaching for whole foods,
Right.
single ingredient foods, foods that are not made in a lab or a plant, things that don't have an ingredient list, 18 items long. They're cooking, they're doing little hacks like getting an Instapot, right? So that
Yeah.
you don't have to spend all day slaving away, so that you can prepare meals. And I think you just have to find something that on 300 and I don't know 40 days out of 365 days of the year, you're going to be okay eating and not feel like you're missing out. And whatever, and that looks like different things for different people.
Yeah, I'm definitely a creature of habit. Like when it comes to food, the problem that I face so often is that I am such a picky eater. There is like
Hmm.
a small window of things that I will have. It's just I've been this way since I've been a child. Textures and smells just absolutely screw with my brain. And on
Hmm.
this podcast, you've heard I've talked a lot about the mental aspect of this thing because I think that that plays a huge part into it.
Right, right. And so, I mean, but even with that said, you have your certain go-to things that you like. And again, as long as that works for you, I don't think there's a problem with it. And so, what I find is when I work with people, is that I'll have people come and say, well, they told me in order to, I don't know, lose weight or treat my diabetes, I could only eat 50 grams of carbs a day, and that's not sustainable for me. So then we'll analyze their diet, look at what they are eating, where are opportunities to cut out processed carbs, because if you cut out, and when I say cut out, obviously we're human, but
Yeah.
decrease it, you know what I mean? Um, by virtue of doing that, you do lower your carbohydrate intake. But you still can have fruit and green leafy vegetables and different things like that, and still be above quote unquote 50 grams of carbs a day and still notice health benefits. So that's the thing. I think we get so focused on specific numbers that we have to kind of bring it back and just look at the quality of our food, what we're eating, try to minimize, the processed foods. No one that I know of, maybe you do, I don't know anyone who ever OD'd on broccoli.
No.
I'm not worried about you eating broccoli. You know what I mean? Like that's not
Yeah.
like by the time someone comes to see me or we're interacting on Instagram or whatever, it's not that they had too much broccoli. That's not the root of all evil. So I'm like,
Yeah.
well then let's stop arguing about whether or not you should have broccoli or you shouldn't have broccoli. Let's look at the things that we know are actually a detriment.
Definitely. I think a lot of the vegetables I like when they call them like free 99. I like that. You want to talk
Hmm.
numbers?
I mean,
Free 99 is a good number.
yeah, and they're, vegetables are great. They're nutritious. You have lots of different variety. They make nice sides with anything pretty much. Most of the times they're quick and easy to cook. Steamed, sauteed. I mean, all of that stuff usually shouldn't take more than like 10 minutes. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's always going to be a safe bet.
Definitely. One of the things I like to ask everybody before you got kind of started with your weight loss and everything, what was one of your biggest guilty pleasure foods?
Oh, Reese's. Peanut
Oh,
butter.
yes. Yes. I love the Reese's.
They're so good. I don't know what that combination, and it's just Reese's. Like other peanut butter chocolate combinations don't have the same, it's just Reese's. I don't know what they did to it. They put something in it, I'm sure.
They had to have. I just remember being addicted to those. For me, it was always either Snickers or Reese's.
Mhm.
Whether it's the Reese Pieces, Reese Cups, they were just God. There's just something about them that I couldn't. As far when it came to chocolate, that was at the top of my list was Snickers for sure.
Yeah, no, that if I would be the Reese's peanut butter cups.
How was the transition for you, going from the unhealthier stuff to the healthy stuff? Because I know for me, like I would always like early on, because I think a lot of people they always have this internal debate of, well, I have to say no more of this forever or no more of that
Right.
forever. I like to do what I call like hacking it, like finding stuff that I like, and just finding like a different version, an alternative. So, for instance, my biggest addiction at one point was cheeseburgers. And so what I did
Mhm.
was instead of having two of them for dinner, I have one, and that one is a turkey burger that sits on a wrap instead of a bun. But I still allow,
Mhm.
one slice of cheese and a little bit of sauce. But, I'm cutting back all these other things to allow room to have this burger how I would want it. But it's a turkey, and then you add a little more vegetables with it. And I found
Right.
that to be a nice compromise, as opposed to just saying no more of this. Although now I'm doing these wild challenges where I said no pizza for a year, no alcohol for a year, no chocolate for a year,
Yeah.
just to try. I mean, because I still lost 100 pounds and I had these things in my life. They were popping in here and there, and then this year I'm like, I just want to try some new things. I'm like, what happens if I give up these things? So for you, when you were making that transition, what was it like for you?
Yeah, so I would say initially, so I like science. I guess that's not a surprise, but
You don't say.
like I guess you hope that I like science would be a problem. I guess if I didn't, but
Yeah.
I so after I read the Obesity Code, I stumbled onto a book called Deep Nutrition by Dr. Kate Shanahan, which kind of went through just more of like an ancestral way of eating. What I mean by that is just eating kind of again like our forefathers, our grandmothers, and all of that ate. And so um, I started looking at food labels, and I'll be honest, I never really looked at food labels before.
Right.
I mean, when I would count calories, I would look at the food label to see specifically how many calories were there, but I never really like dove into the ingredient list. And honestly, even if I had at that time prior to reading that book, I don't know that I really would have recognized what I should have been looking for or not. So once I like got a little more education, self-educated myself just on nutrition, food labeling, ingredients, etc. I went through our cabinet. I'm surprised I didn't drive my husband crazy. I went a little extreme, and I was like, read everything. I was like, okay, so we have to throw that away, and we have to throw this away, and we're getting rid of that. And blah blah blah. And he's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I just finished this book, and blah blah blah. So I would say that was probably a little bit extreme initially to
Yeah.
kind of purge the cabinet. But what that did for me though was then to kind of focus on now that I know the things that I probably will only have in moderation or rarely at all, kind of like you said, well, what are the healthy substitutes? So, for instance, instead of cooking in canola oil, I now cook in avocado oil.
Okay.
So, I don't think oil inherently is bad. I don't think butter is inherently bad. But I think like what is it? What is the effect? Are there some that we should be cooking in and others? A lot of things, one thing that I find a lot of people don't know, we hear about olive oil and how great olive oil is, and olive oil is great, but olive oil was not meant to cook with that high heat. And
Right.
a lot of people don't realize that. And so it creates, oxidative stress and then can react with your blood vessels in different parts of your body. Where if you look at people in the Mediterranean, they use olive oil, but they're using it as marinades, as salad dressings, to
Yeah.
dip things in. They're not frying things, on the pot. So, me just learning more about that, it wasn't necessarily that, now I can't have anything sauteed or anything like that. It's like, no, I found the healthy oil substitute. Kind of like what you're saying. There's no one's saying that your meals can't be flavorful and enjoyable, but I choose to cook and season my ingredients and other things.
Yeah, and I always found that, just cutting out other things to allow for other things. You think about like when you're budgeting money or, something like that, it's like, okay, well, I want X, Y, and Z, but I need to maybe save up in this world or cut this out in order to get to that point. So, like for me, salad dressing is a big thing. It helps me to eat the vegetables. So I'm willing to
Hmm.
cut out, a couple of extra things throughout the day to be able to allow for that salad dressing to not have a big impact, on my daily intake. And so it's all about customizing it for you and figuring it out, and not, there's not a one size fits all. Otherwise you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, essentially, I think.
Right. No, exactly. And that's why I think with just focusing on, single ingredient foods, and when I say single ingredients, I mean like your vegetables, right? Because you can't make a vegetable, you have to grow it. So, like your
Yeah.
vegetables, or if you are going to eat meat, getting fish and salmon's really good, especially like the Alaskan wild caught salmon is a really good quality type meat that gives you lots of omega 3s and DHA and all of these other things that are good for brain functioning and decrease inflammation. So there are ways to kind of manipulate your diet or your lifestyle so that your food is actually more nourishing. The concept where you hear people use food as medicine, actually eating higher quality things, and it doesn't have to be expensive. I think that's the thing that I'll notice, especially when people are going more of a low carb approach, and they'll say, okay, well, now I'm going to buy collagen supplements and protein powders and all these different things. I have to have my keto bar and all X, Y, or Z. And when you break it down and look at how much that stuff cost, you probably could have afforded Alaskan wild caught salmon. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, and so I think it's just one of those things you have to look at. I personally prefer to spend my money on whole real foods rather than, you know, um, buying collagen powder. And that's not to say for people who buy it and feel like it has great benefits. I'm not discounting how you feel about that. I'm just saying if we're looking at a cost standpoint, sometimes all of these aids and things that we think are really helping us end up just draining our wallet.
I, you just hit the nail right on the head, because on this podcast, I've been trying to hammer that message home, maybe not quite as eloquently as you just said it, but just the amount of money that's being thrown out the window for these different products. And especially on Instagram, it's very prevalent. A lot of, a lot of different companies, or, they have these pyramid schemes where they have these sellers who are
Yeah.
just up in your DMs and on your comments and all this stuff, just trying to sell you a bill of goods, essentially, and promise you the world. And the thing that kills me is they, a lot of times they post these before and after photos, and they put their little graphic at the bottom, and they say, well, when I drank this milkshake, I lost all this weight, like
Right.
that. And
No.
especially in your world, I imagine you're able to sniff that out very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things. Like, I don't know if you remember hearing about it. Um, the this was back when I was in residency, but the HCG diet. Have you heard of that? That was
I
like
haven't
super
heard about
popular.
that one. Tell me about
It
that.
was mainly women doing it, and we do not recommend it. But
Okay.
they were basically and I forget where they got the HCG, but HCG is a hormone that pregnant women make, and you urinate out, but
Sure.
it's also in your bloodstream. And so there was a diet where you basically would buy purified HCG, however they purified it, I have no idea. And you were supposed to take it, and it was supposed to allow you not to be hungry so that you could only eat 500 calories a day. And people were like, I lost all this weight because it's the beta HCG. I was like, you're losing weight because you're only eating 500 calories a day, and you can't keep that up forever. I'm just saying. So,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? But that, to get that little vial of HCG was hundreds of dollars, you know? And so it's like that every once in a while you'll have new gimmicks that come out. And I think it's because, one, we just don't really teach nutrition as a society, you know, at a society level at all.
Right.
Um, we just don't understand it. It's not necessarily a core concept in schools, right? I mean, your nutrition education that you may have gotten all the way through high school might amount to what, 10 hours? I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, it's if that. In college, again, it's not anything that's necessarily mandated. You know, in college, you have the core classes that all freshmen have to take or you test out of. You know, nutrition's not one of them. And so then we start to hear all of these different things, and we just don't have the background to know really what is right and what's wrong. But like you said, we see that picture of the person, the before and after photo, that's probably photoshopped.
Yep.
And we think because it worked for them, it's going to work for us.
And
Um,
not 9 times out of 10, it's not even it's not even like a real person that used that product. That's what kills me.
exactly.
How these people are not in jail at this point, I don't know. But the preying on the insecurities of people, especially right now, because we're in January. I mean, we're almost at the end of January, but this is the time where everybody's jumping in. You know, they want to make their New Year's resolutions. They want to get back on track, and this is the time where they are emptying out their wallet in mass. I can't even begin to just even guess a number of money in transactions that have gone through in this month alone of these supplements and other
Right.
pills and whatnot. It's got to be astronomical.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, I think by the time we total up all the money that we're spending on those things, um, you know, there is probably money in the budget. Again, not saying that you're going to have wild caught salmon every night for dinner, but
Right.
there's probably a room in the budget somewhere in your current budget to have it once a week, you
Yeah.
know. And other hacks are, depending on what your situation is, getting a deep freezer. And everyone thinks a deep freezer has to be this huge chest. They have small deep freezers. They have
Yeah.
small deep freezers that fit in the corner of a living room if you wanted to. And so that way, when you see things are on sale, you can take advantage of buying it in bulk. Another place that people I don't think really think about much, but Aldi. Aldi has really affordable prices. They have some of these things like ghee, which is purified butter. You know, you can get farm raised eggs there, and you can get it at lower cost than what you're getting it if you went to Whole Foods. So you don't have to think that you're shopping at, you know, whichever brand place and then paying the 200% markup on things. You know,
Yeah.
you can get creative and get your things on a budget.
I don't know if you have them around your neck of the woods, but Lidl as well. They're also a pretty good price. My wife loves going
Mm.
there.
Okay, no,
Um,
we don't have them, but yeah, no, that's what I'm just looking around, and I think it's more affordable than what I think we realize.
Definitely. And a lot of this comes back to, my whole kind of area of expertise, as I like to think, is the mindset, of things. And one of my pals, Daryl Perry, and if you're not connected with him, the two of you guys, I think the two of you guys need to jump on a podcast together, because I think you guys would just drop straight fire. At Your Level Fitness. If you're not following this guy, you got to check him out. And the two of you guys are like on such a different intelligent level. I always joke on my podcast, I'm more of the simple man kind of deal. And I have all these other like smarter people than me that come on here and just drop fire all day long. I think you got to connect with my man, Daryl, and y'all have to do one as well, because I want to hear that.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but he talks about, at the end of the day, all these diets, they come and go, but what it really boils down to, and I'm never going to say this as well as he can say it, but he actually just did a podcast about this. It's like all these diets are going to come and go, but it all comes down to habits and,
Right.
changing your habits, to follow, a plan that you set, and setting your goals and doing your exercise and eating right. It all comes down to habit. Throw all these fad diets out the window. It all boils down to habit. And that's pretty much the base of what he was trying to say.
Right. No, and I think, I mean, I completely agree because the thing is, it's what you do consistently over time with anything, right? That's
Yeah,
what's going to last. It doesn't matter. It doesn't just have to be weight loss. Apply it to anything. It's what if you're going to work at it consistently more days than not, that's what's going to stick with you over time. If it's only for 30 days, and then after that you go back to doing whatever it was before, yeah, it's probably not going to last. So I think it's one of those things about just researching, finding out what you think you can realistically do for
definitely.
life.
It took me years, 10 years to
Oh,
figure this out, you
same
know?
here. Same here, and it's not overnight. And I think that's the other thing too is I think we have to get over the quick fixes, which is easier said than done, right? Because we're
Yeah.
human. But I a lot of this is progress over time. I mean, it. I've been well. We already talked about. My weight has fluctuated up and down since late childhood, but
Yeah.
this time around, when I started at 264, I mean, we're talking about 4 years ago. So I didn't go, from 264 to 175 like in 30 days.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. And I still am, losing weight as we speak. So I mean, for me, it's gonna end up being, a 4 or 5 plus year journey. And then whenever I do reach goal in air quotes, at that point then it becomes the journey of maintenance. So
Yeah.
it the journey's never over.
No, this is for life. But the problem I think is that we live in a time of instant gratification. I can go on my phone right now and I can go on Amazon Prime and have something delivered to my house in 2 hours. Or if I pay an extra
Yes.
$10, I can have it delivered in 1 hour. If
Yeah.
if I want to go on my TV, which is right in front of me, and I want to call up a movie, I can click a button and in about 3 to 5 seconds that movie's going to load and start playing. Like, we live in an instant gratification world, and I think sometimes it poisons our brains. And look, I'm not out here trying to be high and mighty saying it doesn't affect me, because there are times where I want that stuff and I want it right now,
Oh yeah.
whether it's my Amazon package or my movie or whatever it is. But I think that's really the time we're living in right now. It's an interesting time because, when we're younger, we're not really in a hurry. We're kind of just soaking it all in.
Right, right. And I think also, the technology, again, when we're back on social media and we'll see, such and such down 50 pounds in 6 weeks, and then you're like, I lost 5 pounds in 7 weeks, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And you start comparing and contrasting and all of these things, and then all of a sudden you see an ad flash across the screen that says, lose 10 pounds in 10 days. So it's all, I think all of that kind of just plays into it. But my biggest advice to people is at least as it relates to weight loss, is kind of, enjoy the journey. So enjoy learning more, right?
Yeah.
Learn for yourself. You will become the expert of your own body, and I think for most of us, we don't know why this hurts, or why am I snoring at night, or why, these things that might not be functionally well with our bodies. So don't look at it as, oh, this big obstacle that I have to overcome. Look at it as you've set a goal, and so you're going to gain more than just losing weight on the scale. You're going to gain knowledge, you're going to gain improved, sense of self, you're going to gain more awareness. There are all these different, you'll learn more about nutrition. There's so many things to be said beyond the scale, that
Yeah.
really, it's not about a number per se, it's about you being healthy.
Definitely. And I always would advocate, living in the moment, because so often we're like, well, when I get to this, when I get to that, hey, guess what? You may not wake up tomorrow. That's a
Right.
reality. And I think that you've got to take each day as it comes and make the absolute most out of it that you can. I mean, yeah, you could sit on your couch like a robot and watch Netflix, and that's fine. Or you can go work out on the treadmill while there's Netflix playing. That's a nice little hack right there.
Hmm.
But it's just this idea that, tomorrow's guaranteed. It's not, 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, I nearly died. Tomorrow was not guaranteed for me, and I could have gone at any time. And I don't take that for granted anymore. It was silly because that was 2014 and I didn't get started until 2017. So I was clearly taking a lot for granted in between then, but I learned one of the things about this journey. It's not just about losing weight. It's about the amount of things that you learn, the life you gain, and the amount of things that you learn in that time. And what I learned was not to take this life for granted. That's for damn sure.
Exactly. And even along those lines, I mean, this goes not even about weight loss, just in general. Maximize your time doing activities that you enjoy. So I'm not telling you to go, quit your job and be unemployed or,
Yeah,
whatever
it's
like
not a
that.
good
'Cause
idea.
there are there's some necessary evils to the world. But if spend your time around positive people. If people aren't making you feel good, then why be around them?
Yes.
I mean, really, why? Because again, you may have a 9 to 5 that you have to go to because you have a family that you have to provide for and you're being responsible, right? So those are people that you may not choose to be around. But then when you're off the clock, why would you engage in activities that don't make you feel good about yourself or where you're not maximizing your time? Those are just simple hacks that lead to health benefits that you wouldn't even dream of because it's chronic stress. So if you're stressed at work and then you come home and you're stressed and then you join some activity where you're stressed with that and then all these things add up in time. So I think we all have responsibilities, and so we need to be mindful of meeting our responsibilities to those, to not only ourselves but obviously the people in our lives. But outside of those immediate people that you have an obligation to, you really have an obligation to yourself to just maximize your time here and maximize yourself and maximize your surroundings. So I find that often people stick things out and you ask them, well, why are you doing this if it doesn't bring you joy? And they don't have an answer. And I'm like, well, if you don't have an answer as to why you're doing something other than other than the obvious, again, we need to go to work, we need to
Yeah.
do those things.
Yep.
My question to you would be, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Because if it's that frustrating to you and it's not a necessity, couldn't you replace it with something that does bring you joy or that at least doesn't frustrate you?
Yeah, I can tell you in 2019, I'm sure as hell getting away from things that I don't love or feel passionate about, and I'm gonna invest more and more of my time into the things that drive my creativity and things that
Hmm.
I'm into, and I'm actively pursuing that on a daily basis because again, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and I better make the most out of this time on earth that I have as possible.
Agreed. Agreed.
Well, I got to tell you, you just walked on this podcast, lit a match, and set this son of a bitch on fire. I got to tell you, you just killed it today.
Oh, well, I'm glad that I was able to come on and like I said, I know people are still kind of a little new to intermittent fasting, but I right now am working on building up my web page. I do have a web page. It's www.fastingworkgirl.com, and my Instagram handle and Facebook handle are all the same, Fasting Work Girl, where I talk about intermittent fasting and can answer some questions and things like that about anyone else who might be interested in trying it out. Like I said to people, let your sleep help you. You don't have to feel like you're the odd one out during the day. You can
Yeah.
have your meals, but we do sleep, and I would challenge people also, not to get on too much of a tangent, but to also try to prioritize sleep. And I know that is easier said than done, but especially when it relates to health effects, there was a study, there's several studies again, but this one's the Wisconsin sleep study, where they noticed a U shape in changes of body composition and body fat. So the sweet spot was about between 7 hours a night, 7 to 8
Yeah.
hours. And people who slept less than that started having an incremental increase in weight and BMI. And conversely, people who slept more than 8 hours, like once you're getting to your 9 and 10 hours a night, also had an increase in weight and chronic diseases. So don't underestimate the power of self care, because I think again we get focused on weight loss, weight loss. I have to drop 50 pounds. I have to drop 100. I have to drop whatever. There is so much more to well-being than the number on the scale, and so things like prioritizing sleep, meditating, mindfulness, those activities also go a long way to help with your health. So,
Oh,
and
you're.
obviously, I'm not anyone's doctor, so don't say that I told you to do it and then you have a complication or something, because I don't know anyone listening personally.
But you are a doctor.
But I am a doctor, and I
That
do
is
think that there's
fantastic.
so
Tell
many ways to prioritize your health. So.
tell me before you go. I meant to ask this earlier and it slipped my mind. Tell me before you go how you got into being a doctor. Did you as a kid were you like, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up? Was it one of those things, or did it come later on?
So randomly, yes. I my pediatrician. So we lived next door to our pediatrician, and I remember my mom like lifting me up over the fence so that Dr. Lee could look in my ear and see if I had an ear infection. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, and I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. But when you're in medical school, you do lots of different clinical rotations.
Yes.
And so on my peds rotation, like the first week, I was on inpatient peds service and I got sick. And I was like, all right, so if I work with kids, I'm probably going to be sick all the time. So we're going to scratch off pediatrician from the list.
Yeah.
And ended up really liking my OB rotation, and then really liked high risk obstetrics. So I ended up specializing in maternal fetal medicine, which is a high risk obstetrician.
Wow. This is crazy. This is the first time I've had a doctor on the podcast. How about that one?
Oh, cool. Well, I'm glad to come on.
And you came on and dropped all the fire. Now you do your own podcast, right?
Well, I have, so it's a weekly Instagram live
Okay.
series. So right now, what we do, the next one is actually tomorrow. But every week on Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. Central Time, I get on Instagram Live and I do a joint Instagram Live with a guest. And so we go over health-related topics. I've had several different physicians on. Actually, the one that I'm getting ready to do coming up, I believe he follows you as well. He goes by the handle on Instagram, Al Keto Bonito.
Oh yeah, Al. Yeah.
Yeah, Al. And he's lost over 170 pounds, and so he's going to come on because I wanted to break it up from, the physician chats. Not, I don't want it to sound like preachy. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, I got
and
it.
so I think a lot of times people also do better starting their own journey if they can see someone who has done it. And so Al, like, just like yourself, kind of took the bull by the horns, set his mind to it, researched it, found a method that worked for him, did it on his own, and so I wanted him to come on and just kind of give my listeners some motivation and give some practical tips as being someone who has lost a significant amount of weight. What were his tricks? What was his mindset like? Because like you've already said many times before, it's one thing to say you're going to go out and do something, but like what was the mindset? Like what did you have to overcome? What are your tips and tricks? And I think that will help people. So I do a mix between having certain topics where I feel like people need to hear more about that they may not have time to hear about, especially with like nutrition and things like that. And then I also host like Q&A sessions where I'll go Instagram live, and for 30 minutes, people just rapid fire questions at me that they may not have had a chance to ask their own physician.
Oh, that is huge.
And so, so I try to be interactive. At some point, I think it would be cool to have a podcast, but I just right now between actually having a clinical practice and then doing the things. So Instagram Live gives me a way to kind of reach that same type of audience, but I also give the disclaimer, it's live, so what you get is what you get.
No, I get it, and I like that you're doing that, because there are some doctors that are on Instagram. I think that that's great. Get out there and give the people a chance to ask real questions. And while you're not saying, I'm specifically saying do this, this is my thought on it, this is my opinion, and to consult with your own doctor. I think all that's great. You're giving people access. How many people would love to just walk up and ask a question to a doctor? That's invaluable. It's huge.
Exactly. And so I'm just trying to like make the information more accessible. And just like you said, there's a plethora of now physicians on Instagram just trying to help find different ways, like with our blog posts and things like that, disseminate information that you may not have time to go over with your physician. Because, I mean, we'll be realistic. When you have a 15-minute office visit and we're looking at, what's going on with you, it's probably, if we'll have time to maybe address your top 2 or 3 issues.
Right.
And then once we get through that, having a conversation about lifestyle nutrition, that could easily be a 30-minute to hour-minute discussion. And so I just think how today's medical system is set up, the time, it's not that physicians don't want to spend time. We do want to spend time with you,
Sure.
but it's just how the system is kind of crafted that we don't have necessarily as much time as we'd like. And so I feel like this gives me a platform to help disseminate all the things that I wish I could say, and provide people with evidence-based information.
That is why you are going to win right there. It's why you're already winning. This is a great, genius thing to be doing. So do me a favor one more time. Tell the people where to go for the Instagram, because that's, I think, our biggest audience.
Yes. So Instagram, you can find me at Fasting Work Girl. It's just like it sounds, all one word, Fasting Work Girl. And then if you want to check out my blog post where I go a little bit more into the science, it's the same website, www.fastingworkgirl.com. And you can find me there. And I do check my DMs, and my email is info@fastingworkgirl.com. So you can always reach me that way as well.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to do, and I think some of the listeners that have been here for a while, they know exactly what I'm about to say, so y'all don't even just try to guess and think it's something different. I want everyone listening to stop what you're doing, and most of you are listening on phones, and I know that you're listening on phones, and I want you to minimize this screen that you have the podcast on. I want you to do this right now, and I want you to go to Instagram, and I want you to type in Fasting Work Girl and follow this doctor. She has dropped an incredible amount of fire on this podcast, and you need to go follow her right now and check out for more information for sure. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. This has been a great time. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And then I'll bug you at some point so I can have you on an Instagram live session so everyone can learn more about you and your inspirational journey.
100%. Let's do it. Let me know.
All right. Thank you.
Remember at the beginning of the show, I mentioned a little thing called Patreon? Well, I'd love to have you join me. But Gary, what is Patreon? It's a website that is helping small creators like me raise funds to further expand their creative visions. For as low as $1 a month, you can help me further my dream of reaching as many people as possible and eventually taking the show on the road to meet all these fine people face to face and add a video element to this podcast. If you were to donate $4 a month, you'd be hearing the show a few days earlier with no commercials and getting access to my close friends group on Instagram. Donate $10 a month and you get all that plus your name right at the beginning of the show alongside other producers. But act fast. That tier is limited to 10 people. I've got a whole lot more to offer, and you can get all the details over at patreon.com/Gary Cantrell. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for checking out the show, and I'll talk to you again really soon. hardworkalwayswins.com. It's more than just a clothing line. It's my mantra. I speak it, I wear it, I live it, and I'd love to have you join the Hard Work Squad. We're constantly adding new items to the store, including our brand new Future-ish hats, which come in a variety of colors, including camo. I mean, who doesn't like camo? We also just put our famous Splash logo in gold to match our OG logo, and there's so much more here. You just got to check it out. Here's the best part. Use the code PODCAST at checkout to take 10% off of your very first order and join the hard work squad today.